In 1931, a man named Emmett Tolliver opened a new ledger and wrote the date on the inside cover. He was 53 years old, living in a hollow in the eastern Cumberland Plateau of Kentucky, and he had not had a regular paycheck in 2 years. What he had was a pocket knife, a hand drill, a smokehouse behind the house, and a mine that treated every dollar like it had a first and last name. Emmett wrote the number down. I'm just reading it back to you. Here is what the first page of that ledger says. October of 1931. Entry number 1. Knife sharpening, 4 households on the Ridge Road. Total collected, 35 cents. In the margin, in pencil, 2 hours, both ways on foot, no supplies used. Below that, one line that took me years to understand. He wrote, cost to start this nothing, cost to quit everything. By 1938, Emmett was running 8 separate income streams from that hollow, none of which required a boss, a bank loan, or a license of any kind. He didn't retire rich. He retired with a house paid, the smokehouse full, and enough set aside that my grandmother never had to ask anyone for anything after he passed. In today's dollars, the man was clearing what the Bureau of Labor Statistics would price at somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 a year through the worst economic collapse this country had ever seen. Today, the median American household carries over $100,000 in debt, and the average savings account holds less than 8 months of expenses. Half the country couldn't cover a $500 emergency without borrowing. And we're the generation that went to school. But here's the twist. Every single method Emmett used is still legal, still available, and still paying. Not one of them requires a college degree, an app, a startup loan, or a personal brand. Several of them are paying better now, adjusted for the cost of what replaced them, than they did during the Depression itself. My name is Wade Tolliver. I'm 58 years old, and I've never lived more than 12 miles from the spot where Emmett built that smokehouse. My family has been in Tolliver Gap on the Cumberland Plateau in eastern Kentucky since 1788, and if we ever figure out how to leave, we haven't tried hard enough. A few years back, I found the ledger in a cedar chest under a quilt my grandmother made. Black cover, cloth spine, 416 pages front and back. 48 years of what things cost, what they paid, and in the margins, exactly how he did it. Emmett made me swear before he passed that none of it would die with him. There are still 40 years of margins I haven't opened yet. This channel is me keeping that promise. Now, before we go through all 20 of these, I want to pull 2 out of order because they earned it. Number 17 on this list is one that a fellow outside of Austin, Texas has been running since 2019 out of a 1-car garage. He told a regional small business group that his gross last year came in at $180,000. The method is 100 years old and requires about $300 in startup equipment. You'll know it the second I say it. And number 3, this one was taught in American vocational schools from roughly 1920 to 1963, and then it disappeared from the curriculum in the same decade that a large national retailer started selling the cheap manufactured version. When that happened, the skill went from being common knowledge to being something people paid for. That gap is still open. Let's start at the top and work down. Number 20. The subscription produce route, West Tennessee, 1933. A woman named Dora Haskins ran a half-acre kitchen garden behind her house and spent the first 2 years of the Depression watching the price the grocery broker would pay collapse from what the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks as roughly 30 cents per pound on summer tomatoes down to less than 8 cents. So she stopped selling to the broker. She went door to door in the nearest town, 4 miles away, and offered 12 families a standing weekly box of whatever was ready, greens, beans, tomatoes, whatever was pulling. She charged each family $1 a week. 12 families, $12 every week from May through October. Her startup cost was the seed packets she already had and a wooden wagon her husband had built before he passed. Call it under $5 total. Her weekly earnings through harvest season, $12 in 1933 money, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator puts at roughly $240 today. Over a 6-month season, that was somewhere between $1,400 and $1,800 in today's terms, from a half acre and a wagon. What killed it commercially was the rise of the regional produce distributor through the 1950s and 60s. Cold chain logistics made it easier for grocery stores to carry a consistent product, and the small grower couldn't compete on price or volume, but the direct customer model never actually died. It just went dormant. Today it's called a CSA, a community-supported agriculture box, and people in suburban markets are charging anywhere from $25 to $45 a week per household for the same thing Dora was doing with a wagon. The startup cost on a serious market garden setup runs between $500 and $2,000 depending on whether you already have tools. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks median farm stand gross income for micro operations at figures that suggest a well-run half acre can still clear between $8,000 and $18,000 a season in direct sales. This one is alive, neighbor. Completely alive. Here's your this week. Look up your county extension office. Every county in the country has one, and it's free. Ask them for the current backyard market garden guide. Most of them have one, and some states have a small producer sales exemption that lets you sell directly without a commercial license under a certain dollar threshold. That threshold varies by state, so ask specifically. Don't assume. Number 19, the Community Ice House Cooperative. Before rural electrification reached most of Appalachia and the Deep South, which didn't happen fully until the late 1930s and into the 40s, ice was not free. A man in a small town in western North Carolina in 1928 could sell shares in a communal cold storage facility for between $2 and $5 per family per season. Emmett noted in the spring of 1932 that a neighbor named Colby Frazier was running one of these from a hand-dug root cellar lined with sawdust and creekstone. 4 families paid him to store their perishables and their summer harvest. Colby charged $3 per family for the season. His startup was the labor of digging and the sawdust, which the mill gave away. His annual take from 4 families, $12. In today's terms, call that $220. This method is genuinely dead in its original form. Residential refrigeration made it obsolete by the 1950s. But what replaced it, cold storage rental for small farmers who can't afford their own walk-in coolers, is a real and growing market. The USDA Agricultural Census has tracked increasing demand for shared cold storage among small and mid-scale producers since roughly 2012. What Colby was doing for $12 a season now runs between $300 and $800 per month in commercial cold storage rental rates. If you have a large outbuilding and the ability to insulate and climate control it, there are small producers in your county right now who are renting cold storage by the shelf or by the cubic foot. Check your local agricultural Facebook groups or your county extension office before you spend anything. Number 18, roadside timber and firewood arbitrage. Southern Indiana, 1935. A man named Russell Tate bought standing timber rights on a 10-acre parcel that a neighboring farm family needed to sell quickly for cash. He paid $40 for the rights. He spent 3 weekends cutting, splitting, and cording. Then he sold the cordwood to 4 households in the nearest town at $4 a cord. He moved 6 cords, took in $24, and kept his own winter's wood for nothing. Startup, $40. Return on 6 cords, $24 in sales, plus the wood he kept, valued at another $4 minimum. Net against startup, a loss on paper. But Russell had standing timber rights for the remainder of the season, which he used twice more. Total take from one 10-acre plot over one season, somewhere between $40 and $60 in 1935 currency, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator puts in the range of $800 to $1,100 today. Firewood still sells. The National Firewood Association, which is a real trade organization, reports that a cord of hardwood firewood sells for between $250 and $400 in most northern and midwestern markets today. A cord is a stack 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, and 8 feet long. It takes one healthy person with a chainsaw and a splitter about a day to process from standing timber. The equipment rental runs between $80 and $150 for the day depending on your area. Check your state's timber harvesting regulations before you touch a tree that isn't yours, and know that some states require a permit for commercial sale of firewood to prevent the spread of invasive species. That varies by state. One call to your state forestry division gets you the answer. Number 17, the mobile knife and tool sharpening route. This is the one from Austin, Texas. And it was the same thing Emmett was doing in October of 1931 on the Ridge Road. Here is the economics. A Japanese waterstone progression for sharpening runs between $60 and $150. A leather strop costs $15 to $30. A quality bench vise or portable sharpening jig costs between $40 and $120. Total startup for a professional grade mobile sharpening kit, under $300, and you can start for less if you buy used. In 1931, Emmett charged 8 cents per blade. In 1938, he had raised it to 15 cents, which he noted was what the hardware store charges, and they do it worse. In today's terms, 15 cents in 1938 is roughly $3. But today's market rate for professional knife sharpening runs between $5 and $15 per blade at mobile setups, and kitchen knives at restaurants are often priced per inch of blade. A restaurant account with 20 knives sharpened monthly at $8 per blade is $160 a month from a single customer. 10 restaurant accounts is $1,600 a month. The Bureau of Labor Statistics does not track this as a separate occupation, but small business reporting in the food service sector consistently shows that knife sharpening services are budgeted as a recurring operating expense by most professional kitchens. This method is alive. It has been alive continuously since before Emmett was born. It didn't die in the Depression. It didn't die when the electric knife sharpener came out. It is alive right now. And the man in Texas is proof. Here's your this week. Go to your local restaurant row on a Tuesday because Monday is often recovery and Friday is too busy. Walk in the back and ask who handles their knives. Offer to do one set for free so they can see the result. Bring your kit. If they like it, you have a recurring account. Now the first pattern break, friend. From number 16 down to number 11, we're not in the Depression anymore. We're in the post-war years, 1946 through roughly 1970. These were the years when wages were rising and the old skills were starting to look unnecessary. They weren't, but they started to look that way, and that is when the gap between what your grandfather knew and what you know started to open up. Everything from here on is something that was fading out of common knowledge by the time your parents were in school. Stay with me. Number 16, the domestic canning and preservation contract. Women in rural Ohio in the 1940s and 50s would contract with neighbors to put up their harvest for them. Not just their own harvest, the neighbor's harvest, in the neighbor's jars, using the neighbor's produce for a flat fee per case or per day. A woman named Neva Grubb in a farming township east of Columbus ran this as a service through the entire canning season, roughly July through October, charging what Emmett noted from a letter exchange as $2 per day of labor, plus a share of the processed goods. $2 a day in 1948 converts to roughly $23 today per the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator, but Neva wasn't doing one day. She was booking 4 to 6 days a week through a 4-month season. At 4 days a week for 16 weeks, she was clearing $128 in 1948 money, or about $1,470 in today's terms, plus the food itself. What killed the commercial version of this was the rise of the supermarket frozen food aisle through the 1950s and 60s. Freezing replaced canning in most households, and the skill became niche. But here is what replaced it at the premium end. Small batch custom preserves, sold direct. A half-pint jar of properly made wild blackberry preserves sells for between $7 and $12 at farmers markets in the Southeast and Midwest. A case of 12 jars, 3 hours of work if you're practiced, plus fruit grosses between $84 and $144. The Ball Blue Book of Canning, which is the standard home reference, is available at any hardware store for under $10 and covers safe acidification, processing times, and altitude adjustments. Check your state's cottage food law before you sell anything. Every state has one, and most allow low-acid canned goods to be sold direct to consumers without a commercial kitchen license under a certain annual revenue threshold. Find your state's threshold before you spend $1 on jars. Number 15. The Draft Animal Share Agreement. This one is dead, and I'm going to tell you what replaced it, because the replacement is what matters. In 1932, a farmer in the Hill, Emmett's Ledger has one of these recorded from a cousin's arrangement in Kentucky. The mule cost what would be roughly $2,500 today. Shared 3 ways, that was under $900 per household. Solo, the same animal was unaffordable. The mule is gone, but the structure is not. The agricultural equipment share cooperative, where neighbors pool money to buy a piece of equipment none of them could afford solo, is documented and active across the Midwest and South. The USDA Farm Service Agency has tracked equipment sharing arrangements as a formal cost reduction strategy for small producers. A used baler costs between $8,000 and $20,000. Split 4 ways among neighboring small farms, that is between $2,000 and $5,000 per farm. If you have neighbors who are small producers, this conversation is worth having. Number 14. The Rural Lending Library paid per book. Nebraska, 1936. A retired school teacher named Florence Meade had roughly 400 books, which was a substantial private collection in 1936. She charged 2 cents per week per book, with a 10-cent deposit per volume. At any given time, she had 60 books out. That was $1.20 a week, or roughly $20 a month in 1936 dollars, about $410 a month in today's terms. Her startup was zero. She already had the books. This is dead. I want to be honest with you. The public library system, the internet, and the used book market killed the paid lending library completely. But the mechanism monetizing access to a thing you already own instead of selling the thing is alive in 100 forms. Tool libraries, equipment rentals, storage subleases on outbuildings you're not using. If you own it and aren't using it full time, someone nearby may be willing to pay for access. That's all Florence was doing. Number 13. The wood stove and chimney cleaning service. Here is one that is more alive today than it was in 1950. A man named Harlan Bates in a small Ozark town in Missouri, and I'm telling you Missouri specifically because the Ozarks sit in Missouri and Arkansas. Not anywhere else was cleaning flues and wood stove pipes for neighborhood households in 1949. He charged 50 cents per job, which was considered fair since the hardware store charged 75 cents to do the same work. His startup cost was a set of chimney brushes, which he bought secondhand for under $2, and a drop cloth. 50 cents in 1949 is about $6 in today's money. But today's chimney sweep rates run between $150 and $350 per job because wood-burning stove installations have grown significantly since the energy price spikes of the 1970s. And again, since 2022, the Chimney Safety Institute of America, which is a real credentialing body, certifies chimney sweeps, and many insurance policies and local codes now require certified inspection before a wood-burning appliance can be insured or sold with a house. That certification exists, it costs money to get, and in most markets the demand for certified sweeps outpaces supply. If you already do this informally and want to make it a legitimate business, that certification is the door. Not a conspiracy, neighbor. Just how markets work. When something becomes a code requirement, it becomes a profession, and the people who are doing it for 50 cents a job either got credentials or got out. The ones who got credentials built businesses. Number 12, the egg and poultry route. This is one of the most documented income sources in American rural history, tracked by the USDA going back to the 1920s. A family in central Kentucky in 1934 keeping 25 hens could expect, according to USDA production estimates from that era, somewhere between 300 and 400 dozen eggs per year from that flock. At 12 to 15 cents a dozen in 1934, that was between $36 and $60 a year, roughly $700 to $1,100. In today's terms, from feed costs, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked at around $8 to $12 annually for a flock that size. The math today runs differently because feed costs have risen faster than egg prices at the commodity level. But direct sales at farmers markets and homestead stores currently run between $5 and $9 a dozen in most markets, which changes the equation entirely. The USDA has a small flock exemption for backyard egg producers that varies by state on how many birds you can keep before commercial licensing kicks in. Check your county ordinances first, because some municipalities have their own rules on top of the state rules. Number 11. The tobacco curing and direct sale. This one requires context before I say anything else. In eastern Kentucky, western Virginia, and much of North and South Carolina, tobacco was the economic engine from roughly 1900 through the 1980s. Emmett's ledger has 30 years of tobacco entries. In 1938, he grew and cured roughly 800 pounds of burley tobacco on about half an acre. He sold it through the Federal Tobacco Price Support Program established under the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933 at what the program guaranteed, which that year was roughly 22 cents a pound. 800 pounds, $17.50. That is about $360 in today's money from half an acre. This is the first point where I have to be direct with you about what died and what survived. The Federal Tobacco Price Support Program was dismantled in 2004 under what was called the Tobacco Quota Buyout. That program had protected small tobacco growers for 70 years. When it ended, the economic floor under small tobacco farming went with it. This method, as Emmett ran it, is effectively dead for the small producer. What survived is the craft cigar and specialty tobacco market, which operates under completely different economics and requires a different scale. I'm not going to dress that up as a replacement for what Emmett was doing, because it isn't. Now the second pattern break, friend. From number 10 down to number 4. Every method on this list is one that someone is running right now, today. Not as a hobby, not as a side experiment, as a primary or substantial secondary income. The money is real. The skill is learnable. The question is only whether you're willing to show up to something that doesn't have an app. Number 10, the mobile small engine repair route. Ohio, 1974. A man named Delbert Crane drove a half-ton pickup with a toolbox in the bed and repaired small engines, lawnmowers, tillers, chainsaws, outboard motors at the customer's property. He charged $12 per job for a basic carburetor clean and tune, more for parts. He was doing 6 to 8 jobs a week. At 8 jobs a week at $12 a job in 1974, Delbert was clearing about $400 a month. The Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator puts that at roughly $2,500 a month in today's dollars. His startup was his tools, which he already owned from years in a repair shop, plus the truck. Today, the average outdoor power equipment repair shop charges between $65 and $125 per hour for labor and mobile repair services, where you go to the customer instead of making them haul a heavy machine, typically add a service call fee of between $20 and $50 on top. A mobile small engine tech who builds a route of recurring customers can realistically run between $3,000 and $6,000 a month in billings, depending on market size and season. The startup costs for a competent home mechanic who already has basic tools runs under $500 to go mobile professionally, Check your state on business licensing for repair services. Some states have requirements and some don't. Find out before you take the first dollar. Number 9, the estate sale and resale operation. This is the one that looks simple and isn't. A woman named Bess Whitmore in western Kansas started buying the contents of farm estate sales in 1953. Not picking the good pieces, buying entire contents, whatever, didn't sell at the estate sale for a flat sum. She paid between $5 and $20 for the lot. She cleaned, repaired, and resold piece by piece at a roadside stand she built on her property. $5 to $20 in 1953 is roughly $55 to $220 today. She was acquiring inventory at close to nothing and selling at full replacement price. Emmett corresponded with a cousin who knew her family, and his ledger notes that she was clearing between $40 and $60 a month in the mid-50s, somewhere between $450 and $675 a month. In today's terms, with no employees and no storefront. Today, this operates through a combination of estate sale attendants, online resale platforms, and flea markets. The margin structure is essentially identical to what Bess was doing. The difference is that competition is higher now, which means you have to know what you're buying. The people who do this well, who consistently buy low and sell with margin, are students of the objects they buy. You cannot do this in general. You can do it in a category where you know more than the estate sale company does. That knowledge gap is where the money sits, and it always has. Number 8, the contract food preservation for restaurants and grocers. Not canning for families, canning at volume for commercial buyers. In the agricultural belt of the upper Midwest in the 1930s and 40s, small operators contracted directly with local grocers and diners to supply house-made pickles, relishes, jams, and fermented goods. A man named Otto Schreiber in an agricultural county in central Iowa contracted with 3 diners and 1 grocery in the nearest town in 1941 to supply what Emmett's ledger, from a business letter reference, puts at roughly 40 to 60 quart jars per month across all accounts. At 15 cents a jar, that was $6 to $9 a month, or about $100 to $150 a month in today's terms. The commercial version requires a licensed kitchen in most states today, which is the main difference. But cottage food law exceptions in many states allow home production of certain fermented and preserved goods for direct sale under specified revenue thresholds. The market premium end of this, locally made, small batch, sold to farm-to-table restaurants, runs between $8 and $18 per jar for specialty items. The same structure Otto was running. The licensing question is the first thing you determine, and it varies significantly by state. Find your state's cottage food law before you spend $1. Number 7, the hand-sewn custom work clothing trade. 1957, a coal country town in the hill country of southwestern Virginia. A woman named Cora Tackett made and repaired work clothing coveralls, reinforced canvas pants, heavy denim shirts for miners and mill hands who couldn't get proper fit off the shelf. She charged between $2.50 and $4 per garment made to measure, and between 75 cents and $1.50 for repairs. In 1957 money, $4 is about $42 today. But custom work clothing today, when you can find it, runs between $80 and $200 per garment, depending on material and complexity. What Cora understood was that her customers needed clothes that fit their actual bodies and lasted through actual physical work, and that the mass market was not making that. The mass market still isn't making that. The workwear revival market of the last 15 years has created real demand for made-to-measure, heavy-duty clothing, particularly in the trades. A skilled sewist who builds a reputation in a trade community, electricians, welders, tree service workers, can charge at the premium end of that range. Here's your this week. If you sew at all, go to your nearest trade community, a welding supply shop, an electrical supply house, a tree care operation, and ask who makes their custom gear. The answer in most markets is nobody local. That nobody is your opening. Number 6, the specialized orchard and garden labor contractor. Pruning, grafting, and variety management are not skills that come from owning a piece of land. They come from training and practice. And in the 1930s and 40s, the men and women who had them charged accordingly. In a fruit-growing county in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia in 1939, a man named Amos Patton contracted his pruning and grafting skills to 6 orchards he did not own. He was paid between $1.50 and $2 per day, or 25 to 35 cents an hour, which in 1939 money represented skilled trade wages. That translates to between roughly $30 and $45 a day in today's terms. But today's contract orchard labor rates for certified pruning and grafting work run between $25 and $55 an hour in many agricultural markets. According to USDA labor cost surveys of small orchard operations, what made this obsolete at the commodity scale was the consolidation of orchards into large operations that employed full-time crews. But small and mid-size orchard operations, which are growing in number as the local food movement expands, don't have full-time skilled labor. They have seasonal contractors. If you know how to prune a fruit tree correctly, meaning you understand the bearing wood and the scaffold structure, you have a skill that most landowners who plant trees do not have. Number 5, the selective salvage and materials recovery trade. Depression era and never really dead. A man named Cecil Morrow in an industrial town in northwestern Pennsylvania in 1933 made his living pulling reusable materials out of demolished buildings before the rubble haulers arrived. He had an arrangement with a demolition contractor who allowed him first access in exchange for taking a share of what he recovered. He pulled copper pipe, cast iron radiators, old-growth lumber, and hardware, cleaned and graded them, and sold direct to builders and hardware dealers. His arrangement with the demolition contractor cost him nothing. His revenue from one good residential demolition in 1933 ran between $8 and $20, which is between $170 and $430 today. On a good month with 3 or 4 demolitions, he was clearing what would be between $500 and $1,700 in today's terms. Today, this is called architectural salvage, and the margin structure is essentially identical. Old growth heart pine flooring, salvaged from buildings built before 1920, currently sells for between $8 and $25 per square foot to restoration contractors and premium flooring dealers. A set of original cast iron radiators from a building from that era can sell for between $150 and $400 per unit to residential buyers doing period restoration. The startup cost is relationships with demolition contractors, with estate handlers, with building inspectors who know what's coming down. The physical startup is a truck and basic hand tools. This is one of the methods where the money is entirely on the front end of the relationship. The demolition contractor who likes you is worth more than any single recovery. That relationship is free to build, and it lasts. Number 4, the beekeeping and honey production route. And here is where Emmett's ledger gets specific in a way that still stops me when I read it. 1935, Emmett set up 2 hives in a clearing behind the smokehouse. His total startup costs, including the equipment and the package bees, was what he recorded as $4.75. He extracted honey that first season and sold it to 3 households on the Ridge Road at 20 cents a pound and to the general store at 15 cents a pound, commission on display. His first year total, $9.40 from 2 hives. $9.40 in 1935 is about $205 today. But Emmett did not stay at 2 hives. By 1940, he had 11 hives and had contracted his pollination services to 2 orchard operations in the county, which paid him a flat fee per hive per season on top of the honey income. His 40 ledger entry for that year shows a total from bees of $31, or roughly $650 in today's terms, from an operation he ran in the evenings and on weekends. Today, a beginning beekeeping set up 2 hives, protective equipment, basic extraction tools runs between $300 and $600 new, or significantly less if you buy used equipment that has been properly cleaned and sterilized. The national average price for raw local honey at direct sale markets and farm stands runs between $10 and $18 per pound per pricing surveys from small agricultural producers. A healthy 2-hive setup can produce between 60 and 120 pounds of extractable honey in a good season, depending on your region and forage availability. At $12 a pound at the direct sale end, 2 hives in a good season, gross, between $720 and $1,440. Pollination contracts are a separate income stream, and they are growing. As commercial pollinator populations have declined, a trend the USDA has tracked consistently since the mid-2000s. Small orchard and berry operations have increasing need for contracted hive placement. Pollination contract rates for small-scale arrangements run between $50 and $150 per hive per season for placement in orchards and berry fields, on top of whatever honey the hives produce in that location. Check your state's apiary registration requirements before you set up hives. Most states require registration for any number of hives, even one, and some counties have their own ordinances. The registration itself is typically free or very low cost. It exists so that the state can track colony health, not to restrict you. One call to your state Department of Agriculture gets you the full picture. Now, before we get to the top 3, I want to say this plainly, because it's what the whole channel is about. A generation of American men and women built real, debt-free lives with skills like these. They did not need a financial advisor. They did not need a stock portfolio. They did not need a second mortgage on their house to fund a business. They needed a saw, a set of knives, a few hives, and the knowledge of what something was worth and what it cost to produce it. That knowledge was supposed to come down through the family. For a lot of us, it didn't. That is what this channel is here to fix. Number 3, the household water and well management trade. This is the one that was taught in vocational programs. From approximately 1920 through the early 1960s, water system management, meaning the practical knowledge of hand-dug and drilled wells, hand pumps, cistern maintenance, gravity-fed household water systems, and the repair of the equipment involved was taught as a unit in agricultural and vocational programs across the rural United States. The knowledge was considered essential for any household that was not on a municipal water system, which in 1930 was a significant portion of the rural population. A man in a farming county in eastern Arkansas in 1944 who knew how to diagnose and repair a hand pump, reprime a drilled well, clean and reseal a cistern, and install a gravity feed line from a spring box to a house could charge between $2 and $5 per job. In 1944 money, $5 is roughly $83 today. But a plumber license for well work today in most states charges between $75 and $150 per hour, and many rural households have wells that the licensed trade is not set up to service economically, meaning jobs that are too small for a licensed contractor to dispatch to, but that are real and present problems for the homeowner. The vocational program stopped teaching this when rural electrification and pressure pump well systems became standard because the old hand pump and gravity system knowledge was no longer relevant to new construction. But the existing stock of older rural wells and water systems didn't disappear. It's still out there. And the gap between what a licensed plumber charges and what it would cost to have someone with genuine practical knowledge come out and look at the problem is wide enough that this knowledge still has market value in rural areas. Check your state's licensing requirements for well work carefully. Some states have tiered licensing that allows certain categories of well maintenance and repair without a full contractor's license. Some don't. Find out what your state allows before you offer this as a service. Number 2, the direct timber stand management contract. This one takes longer to explain and is worth every second. In the decades from roughly 1930 through 1970, a landowner with timber on his property faced a simple choice: sell it to a timber company who would take everything and pay as little as possible, or manage it themselves, which required knowledge most of them didn't have. A third option existed and was used mostly in the South and Appalachia. The contract timber stand manager, a person who knew which trees to take, which to leave, what the standing timber was worth, board foot by species, and how to negotiate with the mill directly on the landowner's behalf. Emmett did this. His ledger has 8 separate timber management contracts from 1934 to 1951. He charged between $5 and $15 per engagement, depending on the size of the stand, plus a commission, typically 10%, on the eventual sale price he negotiated for the landowner. On a 200-acre mixed hardwood stand in 1946, his commission on the negotiated sale came to $38 over $500 in today's terms from one transaction for knowledge he had built over 20 years of watching the timber market from the ridge. The timber company that replaced this model made its money by becoming the buyer. When the timber company is also the one who tells you what your trees are worth, you have a conflict of interest that has cost Appalachian and Southern landowners enormous sums over the past 100 years. This is documented extensively in academic and policy literature on Appalachian land tenure, including work published by universities in the region. The independent timber consultant, a person who works for the landowner, not the buyer, still exists and is paid typically on a percentage of the timber sale value or on an hourly basis. The Society of American Foresters has a credential for this work. If you are in a forested rural area, this knowledge has market value, and the landowners who need it are your neighbors. Number 1, and I told you I'd build to it. Number 1 is not the flashiest method on this list. It is not the one that gets the highest headline number, but it is the one where knowing it or not knowing it changes the outcome of your entire financial life. Not just your side income, not just your weekend money, but the actual long-term financial position of your household. Number 1, the ownership of a productive asset you can service yourself. I am going to say that again because it sounds too simple, and it isn't. In 1933, a man named Clyde Rayburn, in a holler in the hill country of northeastern Kentucky, owned a smokehouse, a garden, 2 hives, and a half-acre of apple trees. He owned them free and clear. He produced from them, maintained them with his own labor and knowledge, and sold the surplus. His fixed costs of ownership, tools, seed, little lumber, the occasional piece of hardware ran under $25 a year. His income from the same assets ran between $60 and $120 a year. In $1933, that is roughly $1,000 to $2,000 annually today from assets that cost him almost nothing to operate because he knew how to operate them himself. Here is what replaced that model. The financial services industry, through the latter half of the 20th century, successfully reframed wealth building as something that happened through instruments, accounts, funds, products, rather than through productive physical assets. And the knowledge of how to keep a productive physical asset running, how to maintain, repair, and maximize the output of something you own was systematically de-emphasized in education and in culture. Shop class was replaced by computer class. Home economics was replaced by college prep. The knowledge that let a man like Clyde run an asset for $25 a year in maintenance costs instead of paying someone else to do every piece of it was allowed to disappear quietly. Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. Every skill you don't have is a service someone can charge you for. The 20 methods on this list today are all, at their root, the same thing. They are the knowledge of how to produce value from what you own, with your own hands, without asking permission and without writing a check to a middleman for work you could do yourself. The record now says Emmett Tolliver kept that knowledge for 48 years in a ledger with a black cover. He kept it because he believed it would be needed again. Here's my challenge to you. Pick one of these. Just one. The bees, the knives, the roadside wood, the produce box. Give it a real weekend. See what it actually pays. Not what I said. It could pay what it pays you on your land, with your hands, to your neighbors, and then come back here and tell me which one you started. Because that is exactly what a generation of Americans did. They built something real while the rest of the world was waiting on a paycheck, and they were right to do it. I did my own test of this about 8 years ago. I started buying timber stand assessments for a neighbor's woodlot using what Emmett had written in the margin: species identification, board foot estimation, mill price tracking. First contract I negotiated for a neighbor brought him $4,200 more than the timber company's opening offer. He paid me $300. I spent 2 weekends and used nothing but the knowledge that was already in the book. Your granddad knew all this. Somebody just didn't get the chance to hand it down to you. Now it's yours again. Tell me down below which one you're going to try. I want to know if the wood and knife crowd is bigger than the bees and garden crowd. And if your father or your grandfather had a method that didn't make this list, I want to hear about it. I read every one. The one that gets the most comments is the one I build a full video around next time. Next time, I'm opening the ledger to 1938, and we're going to count the ways a man without a paycheck bought a house in 7 years, and the specific decade when the banks made sure that stopped being possible. That one has a villain, and it has a name. Keep what they knew. It'll keep you.